All right, so to start with the fancy one. The fancy one is obviously going to have fancier stuff to it. So we want to do a little bit of planning. I have a sketch, but it's easier for me to show it in Photoshop. This is what my end result is going to be. This is what my end title card is going to look like. Ignore the blue, ignore the orange, okay? Just the green, that's my title card. The blue is the way things are going to animate. So the circle right here is going to scale up, and then the 0, 1 is going to pop into the middle, and then the lines are going to come out, and it's going to go title card, MACA 1900, Sean Sarcona, okay? The orange pieces that are here, those are going to be my accent pieces, okay? So those are going to be like extra little like swirly things or little lines that will pop out just to help show what my animation is going to look like, or just give it a little bit more life to it, okay? So this is how it's going to expand. Before you get into After Effects to even do your stuff, you want to go through this stage and do this kind of setup so that you understand what kind of things you may want. You may add more, you may subtract more, but I want you to just start thinking about those kinds of things. Now, after it's done, this is how it's going to go away, okay? So my title card will go into this line here. The line will then retract into the circle. Same thing with this, same thing with that. The 0, 1 will then move up, and then this circle will then collapse into itself, okay? The animations that we do for this, we're going to start with a completely blank screen. Everything here now. So we're going to start blank. Animate in. Animate out. And then we will end blank again. Now, right in the middle of this, right here, we should have a still moment, okay? We want to have enough time for someone to see the animation. It looks cool. They can see the information, process the information, and then it goes away. What we don't want to have is something animate in, and then the second it animates in, it goes away, okay? So we have to have everything comes in. There's like a 2-second, 1.5 to 2 second pause in the middle, and then everything goes away at the end, okay? Now this is going to be 4 to 6 seconds. Okay, so if we have this area right here is 2 seconds at a most, how much time does that allow us to have an animation? Go ahead.
We have 2 seconds of animating in and then 2 seconds of animating out.
Right. So 2 in and 2 out at most. Okay. So this is where we have to have this plan, because if we don't have this all planned out, it's going to be very difficult to get everything in there. All right. So for everyone's animation, everyone's going to have your screen is completely blank. All the stuff animates in. It stays for 1.5 to 2 seconds, and then everything animates out. Okay. Typically, this part here, pick a different color. This part here is going to be the more complex. Okay. So that could take 3 seconds for that to animate in, 2 seconds on, and then 1 second for everything to animate off. You can balance it out like that too. Sometimes it's going to be a matter of just kind of playing with the keyframes and seeing what looks good. There's no exact formula for making every animation work the exact same way every single time. Okay? So this is what we have to keep in mind. This is what I have to go with. Now, before we get into doing any of this other stuff here, for today's lecture, what I want to talk about is doing the accent pieces, okay? Doing all the different things we haven't talked about. Because so far we've talked about how I would get this piece of text to move left and right. That's what we did last time, right? Keyframe, keyframe, it goes in, goes out. This thing's scaling up. Did we talk about how to scale things up and animate it?
I don't think.
We did.
Oh,
It's the same thing. The same way we do position and rotation and scale. All of those are the same, okay? So even though we didn't show scaling, it's the same process as everything else, okay? We didn't show these lines coming out, but I will show obviously those lines when I talk about the other stuff. All right, so before I even get into After Effects, I'm going to make my folder structure. If you keep yourself organized at the beginning, it's a million times easier to stay organized throughout your entire project. So for this one, I'm going to need my name, title card fancy. And I know that I'm going to need a movies folder. And I know I'm going to need a sound folder.
Oh, this time we're going to use sound?
Yes. So we'll be adding sound to these. We'll be rendering these out into a movie. We don't plan on bringing any artwork into this, but definitely if you wanted to bring artwork, you want to bring something in, I would then make an artwork folder, and then I would be able to put artwork into that folder and then bring it in and keep everything organized. Okay? Wrong one. All right, I'm going to set my tablet aside here. All right, so I just made my folder, movies folder, and a sound folder, and then I can open up After Effects. All right, so I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to make a new composition. And if you remember from last time, our settings are the same. 1280, 720, 24 frames per second. And like I said, we do have the ability to go to 6 seconds for this, so I'm just going to put in 6 seconds. If I only use 5, I only use 5. If I use 4, I use 4, okay? Now, before I do any of these pieces, looking at what some of these are going to look like, this little like swoopy thing here, or these little lines there, okay? I'm going to just create, using my pen tool, just a line. So I'm going to pretend that I'm making one of these things. So this line coming up and then over first. So here, there, and there. Then I'm going to go to my arrow tool, make sure this is filled in enough, and there we go. Right? So this is just that line that would connect this circle to my title card area. Now on here, I'm just doing research and development. That's what this is. I'm not going to then try to use this somewhere else. I'm just testing this one out to make sure that I understand how it works. So the only way I do this is by creating a shape. This is how this one works. So I made a shape. That's what the pen tool does. That's what this rectangle tool does. These both make shapes. Then I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to go to this add, and I'm going to use trim paths. Do you remember last week when I used trim path for something? Do you remember what it was on? The circles. Yep. So when I wipe that circle around, that was a trim path. I'm going to use a trim path for this one. Of all the stuff you just saw there, that trim path is an amazing tool because you can do so much with it. Okay? So I'm going to use that trim path right here. And again, you see the stopwatch at the start, you see the stopwatch here, and you see this stopwatch. That means that all three of these things can be animated. Okay? So the animation for this specific one is I want it to come up and then go over. That's all I want to do. So I'm going to click and drag on all three of these and figure out which one is going to do that. I already know which one, but you don't, okay? So you have to go through and click and drag and see. Okay, that did the opposite of what I wanted to do because it went backwards, okay? I wanted it to go this way and start here at the very bottom and then come up and then go over, okay? So now I know this is the property that I'm going to be animating. So if I go to 0, I click on the stopwatch, I scooch up a little bit, and then I put this at 100. Now I have an animation. Okay? Now I'm going to have this stick around, right? Eventually it's going to go away. But for now it's going to shoot out. It's going to stick around for a little bit. I'm going to click the diamond to say this is where I want you to then start transitioning again. I'm going to go up, and then I'm going to go back to here. And then I'll realize that's not what I wanted to do. Is it? Yes, it is. Yep, that is what I wanted. Sorry. So this goes up, and then it goes in. Oops. And you'll see that I missed. For some reason, I'm at 1%, so I have this little tiny piece. I'll go back to there, make sure this is at 0, and now I should be good. Okay, so this is where we really have to start looking at how we're animating stuff and seeing what looks good. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I stepped out.
You're fine.
What did you do to make that shape? That's the
Just the pen tool.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, awesome.
So, looking at this, you tell me how this looks. Right? So what could we do to help make this look better?
It needs dynamic.
It needs dynamics, right? Which means,
It needs to slow up and speed up.
yeah, we need to have a little bit more speed to it, right?
Speed and slow down, make it look more realistic.
Yeah, so it should kind of like shoot out and then maybe like retract, right? So motion blur 2 will definitely help, right? So those are two things that we will definitely add to every single thing that we animate in this project. Every single thing. That's the difference between boring and fancy. We don't want anything boring from here on out. We can see what's boring. This is going to be fancy. This looks better. Then we get it, and then we never work with that client again, unless they pay good. Some of them do want boring, by the way. Some of them want the same thing over and over again. So how can we change how fast this comes out?
Bring in diamonds closer.
Yep, so we can bring the diamonds closer, right? So that definitely helps speed it up there, and we could bring these closer here too. But now let's do something a little bit different, because right now we're still dealing with linear. We're dealing with the same speed throughout this entire animation. So I'm going to put the diamonds back to where it was here, a little bit more space between them.
Use the graph editor.
Yep, and that's where we're going to use the graph editor. So I'm going to grab the keyframes. I'm going to right-click. On yours, you can hit F9, and you don't have to right-click. On mine, F9 is assigned to my recording software, which will then stop the recording. So I'm going to go to Keyframe Assistant, and I'm going to do what's called Easy Ease. Okay? So just so we can see what this is going to do, oops, I'll just stay in the same document and just hide this. Where's my brush? There's my color. This is a new layer. All right, so before, this is what our speed was doing. It was staying the same speed throughout the entire animation. Okay, whatever it was at the start of the animation, that's what it was at the end of the animation, the same exact speed. What we wanted to do is we wanted to go kind of slow and then speed up a little bit and then slow down again. Okay, this is called easy ease. Ignore the bump. This is easy ease. Let me just fix this real quick. Smoothing, we'll just crank that up. Much better. There we go. So we want this to go nice and easy, or nice and slow, speed up, and then go nice and slow. Okay? That's what I just did right here. That's easy ease. So what we should see now is we should see a little bit of a difference. Okay? It's a little bit more subtle because now we're getting this slow in, speeds up, and then slows out at the end. Okay? Now I'm going to take this a step further. And I'm going to say, okay, well, this is cool because it goes slow and then it goes fast and then it goes slow again. But what if I had it go slow and then just shoot up at the end? Let me draw that again, like that, okay? So what if it goes super slow and then speeds up really quick? So I'm going to go into this. This is the graph editor. This is where the next level of the magic happens, okay? While I'm doing this, I'm going to jump over to my notes real quick. I'm going to make a new page. And I'm going to do setting and adjusting keyframes. I'm doing this now, but keep in mind that later on in the semester I'm not going to be doing this because I'm just kind of showing you things that I would take note of. Okay? So set keyframes. Those are linear, diamond. Okay? So setting keyframes, the diamonds mean linear. That means that it's a constant speed from start to end. F9 or right-click. Keyframe interpolation. Easy ease to smooth it. Okay, and then that hourglass. And then that icon is an hourglass. And again, typically I would grab little screenshots and I would say, this is this, this is this. That makes it easier for me to connect those dots. Okay. And then we have the graph editor button. Again, I would grab a screenshot, point to the graph editor, circle the graph editor, whatever I need to do. Okay. So this is the graph editor. In After Effects, there's two different graph editors. One is a speed graph editor, one is a value graph editor, okay? So in one of these, we're actually editing the values. We're editing what X is, we're editing what Y is, we're editing whatever this number right here is. The other one, we're editing the speed, okay? Which does the same thing, but it's how we're looking at it. If I right-click here, I can edit the value graph, which looks like this. If I zoom in on that area, you'll see that this is going to look very similar to the first graph that I drew. If I can zoom in and then scoot this over, there it is. So you can see how it's low here, straight up, and then low again, right? So we have this angle. That's the value graph. If I go to the speed graph, this is going to look a little bit different, okay? So the speed graph looks like this bump like this. And what it's saying is that it's going to go at a constant speed, it's going to go gradually pick up speed. It's going to get to its fastest point here and then gradually drop off speed, okay? That's what that means. So when we look at this, the highest part, or as it's climbing, that's how fast it's going. So where's the fastest point of this animation? Right in the middle, okay? So if I move this bump to the left or to the right, I control where the speed is going to happen. So I'm going to click on this, and you'll see handlebars at the bottom. And I don't move the handlebars up and down, I just move them left and right, okay? If I move it up and down, it'll actually move that, and I don't want to do that. I'm just going to move this, let's say, to the right. And then I'll drag this one also to the right. Okay? Right. So if we have a second for an animation to happen, it's going to take a second. But how it does that second is what we're controlling here. Okay? So we can have it go super slow for most of those frames, and the last 3 frames it just goes and flies off. Let's see what it does. There we go. Right? It wasn't way faster though, it was the same speed, right? But it looks faster because of how we're interpolating it, how we're changing those keyframes, how they're going from one to the next. So that's going, I'm going to set my work area here to the end of this so we can preview this over and over again. So this is going slow at the beginning and then going fast at the end. So what else could I do to change this? What was that? Not yet. For these keyframes, I made fast at the end. How else could I change how this is looking?
Can you slow it down at the end?
Yeah, slow it down to the end, make it fast at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? So we go here. We're back to basically where we were at the beginning. And then I go there. So now let's watch it and see what happens.
I think that one looks better.
Right. Especially for the kind of animation we're doing, this one might work better, right?
Like we have a car.
Yeah.
When the car breaks.
Yeah. So this could be something that we go with this way. Let me see what the other one looked like again. I actually like this one better just because of how the text is going to fly out. I'm going to take the speed of this, and I'm going to make sure that the speed of the next pieces coming out are also as fast. Okay? If I were to do the slow one, and then I had this text come out at the end, then I wouldn't have the same kind of speed match. Yes, sir?
I was wondering, does it start at 1 because it kind of looks like it does?
What do you mean? Right at the beginning?
Yeah, it's just so fast, it's hard to like.
Oh yeah, it starts right at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And anytime you set keyframes, don't worry about getting it right at the exact spot. I set it here. At any point, I can move those keyframes down or move the whole timeline down too. Okay? All right, so I set those. Oops. And then we're ignoring this other part for now. We'll just set the end of the work area right there. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to add to this, oops, the first one of these little like whoopy things, like whoop, like that. Okay. So what do you think I would start with to create one of those? Pen tool or the circle. Either one is acceptable. If I wanted a perfect circle, I would use a circle. There's nothing wrong with trying it out first. Anytime we use the shape tool, we click off the previous shape because we don't want to join them. And then we click and drag and hold shift. I think I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use the pen tool. Okay. So I want this to basically start right here. And then loop around. And then finish there. Okay. That way it's going to feel like it's part of that same line work. Even though they'll be moving differently, it'll look like it's part of it. And then, of course, I would go through and kind of smooth this out. You know, this is just part of getting used to After Effects and how it works. It's going to feel a little bit different than Illustrator, but you'll survive it. There we go. Okay. So that's that. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit thinner because I want this to feel like an accent piece, so it's a little bit different still. That's good enough for now. Any of these settings we can change later. I can change the color, I can change the stroke weight, I can even move the points around and everything will still work. So how would you animate this thing writing like that?
The
Same way, the trim path. So open up the shape tool, go to add, go to trim path, and then test it out. That's what I want to happen. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to line this up. So when it gets to about here, I'm going to set my keyframe. And then when it gets to about there, I want this to be done. Okay, so now let's watch it and see. Okay, it might be too quick. So let's give it another frame at the end. There we go. That feels better. Okay. Now I don't want it to stay there because it looks weird that it's staying there. I want it to go away. So I can't use end because I know end is just going to reverse that animation. I want it to feel like it's like following it, like it's a line that just kind of like moves along it. So that's where I'm going to use the start of this, and that will then write it the other way. Okay, so I'm going to hit start keyframe. I do the middle of this. I scooch up a little bit, and I go to 100. So notice how my keyframes are kind of stacked in a little bit different order here, or like they're not lined up perfectly. So now let's see. There we go. Maybe I'll give the end another keyframe here, or another frame. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Maybe the line weight of this one, if it was thinner, this might work better. So let's take this line weight down some. There we go. Now, we mentioned before adding motion blur to stuff, okay? So After Effects has two ways that we can add motion, or two things we have to do for motion blur. Each layer has a motion blur ticker. That's what these are, okay? So this is how we add motion blur specifically to that layer. So I say I want motion blur here and motion blur there. New in 2019, that's what we're at, right? Yes, 2019. It automatically will turn this on, okay? In previous versions of After Effects, this didn't automatically come on. If this is on, we should see the motion blur. Now, it's fast, so we don't really see it. So I'm going to go kind of frame by frame, and then we should be able to see the motion blur. Right? Here it is before, really chunky. There it is now. We get this nice soft transition. Now again, you might not be able to see it directly, but you'll miss it if it's not there. Okay? But now that looks a lot better already. Okay? Cool. So that's how we would do that. So this part, doot doot, is done. I would do this line, I would do that line. All of those are exactly the same thing. There's no difference in how I would do this line versus that line versus this line on the bottom. So all of those things are covered. Now let's see how we would do these little lines here. So again, this is research and development. This is not something I'm using yet. I would redo this for my actual design. So for my new one, this shape here, I want to create a separate shape that I could then drop in. These kinds of like little burst things you might use all over the place. So I'm going to make a brand new composition, and because that burst is round and essentially square shaped, I'm going to make this square shaped. So I'm going to say 720 pixels by 720 pixels. Okay, now you'll see why I'm doing this when I do it. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to turn on some stuff. I'm going to turn on this title action save so I can see this. This is the center of this animation. I'm going to turn on my rulers and I'll pull a guide across so I can see exactly where the center of this is. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to draw my shape. So I'm going to lock my guides somewhere in here, lock guides, there we go. And then I'll click this point here. And then I'm going to go out to, let's say, that point. Okay, I'm done with my guides, so I'm just going to go to View, Clear Guides. Good. Okay, so there's my arrow, or my line. Now, how would you animate one of these starbursts shooting out? Same way, right? There's no difference in how we would do one of these. So again, you'll see that trim path again. This is one project, 3 times I've already used it. Trim path. So I'm going to do the end here. I'm going to scooch up to, let's say, there. I'm going to scooch back a little bit, do the start, scooch up a little bit, do the start. Okay, so now I have the same thing I did on the little loop part. Okay, so there's one. Now I'm going to take these and do my, keyframe assistant, easy ease. When you have a few frames, which is what we have here, this is like, less than 10 frames, you may not notice anything with, a lot of speed graph, but I still think I'm going to need to tweak it some. I have 2 things animated, start and end, so I see 2 graphs. Okay, even if they were on top of each other, I would still see 2 things. So I'm going to go right here, and I'm just going to adjust the speed. So I want the speed to actually happen at the beginning of this. I want it to slow down at the end. Okay, and I'm not going to go crazy with it because I don't have a lot of time. There we go. So let's see what that looks like. There we go. Very cool. Okay, and just keep in mind, any shape, literally any shape you want, you can do that kind of thing too. Cool. Now I do want to change something on here too. I don't really like this being so square. So inside my shape options, inside my path, or sorry, my stroke, my line cap, just like you would see in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can change this to like a rounded cap. And so now it's rounded, right? So that looks, yeah, a lot better. Cool. All right, so that's done, right? I have one of these. Now I need to create a star of these all the way around. I have to at some point decide, do I want all of these to happen at the same time? Do I want different lines to happen in different times? All those things I would decide. So we're going to do first all the way around at the same time. So I'm going to go to Add, and I'm going to do a repeater. And so what this is going to do is it's going to repeat that shape over and over and over again. Okay? Now, you will see, I mentioned this before, but here is a transform for the entire shape layer. Here's a transform for the repeater. Under the trim path, under the shape, under this, there's another transform. So just make sure you're editing the right stuff. I want to edit the repeater, so I'm going to go to the repeaters transform, and that's where I'm going to turn stuff on and off. So position is back to 0, and I want to do rotation. So let's say I do 3 of these. Anyone know 360 divided by 3? 120, perfect. Now 102. There we go. There we go. Okay, so very quickly we have 1, boom, now we have 3. And then let's say that I wanted 10 of these. Now I have 10. So what's 360 divided by 10? 36, okay.
It looks like something you see on the.
It looks like a firework.
Yep. Okay, so very easily I can make 15, 25, 30 different modifications for this one thing, okay? Now here's why we did this in a different composition. This comp, I need to start labeling my stuff over here. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to call this Starburst 10, and I'm going to put simultaneous. Extra points if you can spell that correctly. And then I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to say 5 simultaneous. Double click it. Now I'm editing the 5. Notice the different tabs that I have here. And then now I can make this one 5, and then go down to my rotation and make this 72. Now this is why we would have so many different transforms for this. OCD Sean does not like the fact that that 5 is off to the right side. That looks kind of weird, like it's tilted. So I would come down to this transform here, I would go to this rotation, and I would probably rotate this back negative, nope, I was way off there. 18 degrees apparently, that looks right. Okay, so now that feels like it's standing up. Okay, so now I have 5, I have 10, I could use either one of those. I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm going to go to rename, and I'm going to say, let's do 8 different times, or asynchronous. All right, so I need to get rid of the repeater, so I click on it and I hit delete. Okay, so now the repeater's gone. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate this shape, and then I'm going to offset that shape and rotate it manually. So the repeater, it just does the same thing. It repeats, it duplicates it and then rotates it, duplicates it and rotates it. But it's all inside that one node. I'm going to do it manually. Now when I rotate something, I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to rotate, and you'll notice that it's rotating around that center point. That's one of the reasons I chose a square document, so that I very easily can see that is it working or not. Okay? So now I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to rotate it like that. I'm going to duplicate it again, rotate it like that, duplicate it again, rotate it like that, duplicate it again, rotate it like that. Okay, so now I get this. Okay, so think of something, a laser hits a wall or something. I want to have this little like flash of something that happens. I have that. I also have the ability to take any one of these and change their width. Right, give it some more difference between one shape and the next shape. Right, so that feels a lot better. Now I'm going to offset each one of these. Okay, not a lot, just a little bit. I'm going to take the layer itself and just scoot it down like a frame or 2 frames. Okay, so now we'll go back to the beginning. And now we have, again, another layer, another level of animation style to this. Okay, now we could take this again and duplicate it and move it around and whatever else. These types of things, you can create hundreds of iterations of them and use them for all of this kind of stuff. I could even combine them. So let's say that I wanted this 10 mixed in with these. If I just drag this 10 down into here, and then I hit play, now I have the 10 one on top of that one. If I threw the 5 one in here too, we would just get all this kinds of madness happening.
Yeah, if you made them different colors, you guys.
Yep. And then we can still change the colors, right? So if I click on this, I go to the color, I can make this red. And now I have one of them that's red. Okay?
Is there a way to, like, say you want to change the color to all of them, but you don't want to go to each one? Is there a way to, like, default it to all the colors?
If I grab all of these at the same time and click it, then I could do that.
Oh, okay.
If I wanted to change, let's say I brought the 10 in also, right? So the 10, when I'm in here, it's flattened out. There's no settings for that. So I'd have to jump back into the 10 and then click this and then change the colors. But,
So it's like merging it with that right there.
right, it's kind of like in Photoshop. You were to group everything together. That's what we're seeing there is that group, okay? Now, in Photoshop, do you remember, if you wanted to do a levels on everything below that layer, what would you add to it? What was that?
Oh, yeah.
Nope. You have 10 layers. I want to adjust the levels on all these 10 layers. There's some kind of layer I could do above it that would adjust everything below it. Say it louder. Nope. Adjustment layer, right? So After Effects has adjustment layer. Okay, so anything I do to adjustment layer 1 will affect all the layers below it. Under Effect, under Color Correction, here's all the different ways that we can tweak what colors we have there. For most of these, Hue and Saturation is going to be the one you'd want to jump to.
So that's how they change the color, like film look for movies?
It's one of the ways.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So now we can go to Colorize. I can play with the lightness and darken this some, and then take the saturation up and make them all like that.
Like if you pause it at one of your friends, it kind of looks like a pot.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
With an extra hand in there for some reason. Okay, so these kinds of things, these little bursts, these little accent pieces, you can use across the board. And in some of those videos that I was showing earlier, they're using not just these, they're using just shapes. They're actually animating one kind of like a triangle coming out, and that's what they're using as their like accent piece. Okay. All right, so now we have one more thing to cover, which is how would I get this title card to pop out of an area that doesn't exist? Okay, so I want to basically like slide out of a line. Same thing with the 0, 1. I want to slide from inside the circle. Okay. So this is where we would start using masks, which is what someone said earlier. I'm going to go to a brand new composition. I'm going to make this 1280 by 720. And again, this is testing out, making sure I understand how things work. Eventually, I'll make one composition, everything goes into it, and then I'll start playing with it. So I'm going to add my circle here. And there we go. Just scoot that there. I'm going to move my pivot. So I'm going to click on the layer, hit the Y key to get to the anchor point. And then I'll hold Control, and I can snap the pivot right to the center. Okay. So I'm going to go and animate this scaling up. So this is just 0. There you go. So setting a scale keyframe, scooting up a little bit, setting this to 100. Okay, that's boring. What do I do to fix it? Change the graph, right? So first thing, we can't go into the graph editor until we ease. So we always ease first. Then we go into the graph editor, and then we change it. Oops, I want the speed on the other side.
What happens if you do go into the graph editor without using the...
There won't be anything there.
Oh, okay.
You have to do the ease so you see the graph, and then you can tweak it. All right, so whoop, there you go. Now, a trick to anything that you animate like this, like that's scaling, that's 100% just scaling. We're going to get more into these kinds of things afterwards, but don't go from A to B. Think about the dynamics of it, right? So when something scales up, we want to see it kind of like expand past that point and then come back to where it is. So instead of this going from 0 here to 100, I'm going to go a couple frames beforehand and make this like 110. So now watch what happens. You get this little like pop that happens to it. So when we see those lines, the lines feel a little bit more in place. All right, so now I'm going to drop down my 10 burst. There we go. I'm going to try to do that again. There we go. I'm going to go right there. That's where they should come in. I'm going to move this on top of it. Use my arrow keys because my hand is not working. There we go. All right, and now I'm going to line up how that works. Okay, so that feels pretty good. Let me set my end area here. Okay, now do you like everything about this, or is there something you don't like about it?
You gotta get rid of them inside the shape.
Right, inside the shape looks stupid, right? So let's get rid of that. So I'm going to take a this shape here, and I'm going to give it a color. Okay, right now it doesn't have a fill. Your default might have a fill. I'm going to give it a fill. So I'm going to give it, I guess that color for now. Let's go with this pink. And let's darken it. There we go. That looks cool. Okay. All right, still there. If I switch it to the bottom, okay, it looks like it's, no, it's not there. It just seemed like it for a second. Cool. So that seems to work really good. Now I need to get the 0, 1 to fly into this, okay? So I'm going to make a title or a text. I'm going to put in 0, 1. Well, this would actually be 0, 2, right? 'Cause it's the second assignment. Let's go to character. Let's make this bigger. Let's put it on top so that we can see it. Maybe I want to do Helvetica regular seems good there. Okay. And I'll also go into my paragraph. I'll center this. Just like that. Okay. All right. So the idea with this is that it goes bloop, and then the 0, 2 comes in. Okay. So I want the 0, 2 to come out from the bottom of this. So I'm going to animate it just like I would want to animate this. So I'm going to go to my translate Y and scoot this down and say position keyframe. Scoot up a little bit and pull this into frame. I already know it's going to be boring. Yep, that's incredibly boring. So we will go to our keyframe assistant. We will easy ease. We'll jump to the graph editor. I'm going to push the speed to one side. And yep, or F9. F9 on yours. I can't do F9 because of my recording stuff. Okay, now the same thing. That feels too like smacking hard right there. So I'm going to go a couple frames before this, like that, and go above where it should be going. Not past it, but just above that. There we go. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit less speed on there. You can see how crazy these graphs can get once you start really getting into it. There you go. That feels better. Maybe this one can be just another frame past it. All right, it's good enough for now. Okay, so I need to get the 0, 2 so that it doesn't show up until I'm ready for it to show up inside my stuff. So I need to create some kind of mask around this circle so the 2 only shows up when it's inside there. So there's a couple ways I can do this. We're going to do the straightforward way first, which is I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to put it above 0, 2, and then I'm going to switch to my masks here. So it says toggle switches and modes, and this allows me to access this track mat. Okay, on the Make at Macomb, I have a video, masks, hiding stuff, track mats, that kind of thing. I'm going to go here and I'm going to make an alpha mat of shape layer 2. If you remember from Photoshop class, or if you had a 3D class, alpha just means transparency. Okay, so what it's doing is it's going to read shape layer 2's transparency and use that for layer 2's transparency. So now layer 2 looks like it's gone, but it's just because it's not in here that we can't see it. So now that pops in, and boom, there it is. Okay.
You kind of made me think of like a lottery count. Numbers popping up.
Yeah. Hopefully it's your lucky number. Make $1 million. Now when we get into these ones here, it's the same exact thing. Okay. So when I get into that side and I'm typing in, Sean Sarcona, and I've changed my character size. I've made this that one. And just for now, I'm just going to animate it right at the beginning. So it's going to go, from this side to that side. Okay, easy ease. This one, I'm going to put the speed at the start of this. Cool. And now I need it to do the same thing. I need it to be transparent and then pop out. So I'm going to go and make a shape. So this one, I don't already have a shape for it. So I'm just going to click off of all my stuff, go to my rectangle, and draw a box around that shape. Then when I come into here, I'm just going to take my name, go to the track mat, and say alpha. And so now you'll see that my name just slides out of nowhere. Okay. Now you'll notice that every time I do that, it hides the layer above it. So you'll see that this layer got turned off, this layer got turned off. The eyeball, we can't see it. That's fine. We don't need to see it. That's how it works. But just be aware that it's there. Okay? So for this type of thing, that's all we needed. I animated this coming up. I animated these, or figured out how to animate those. I figured out how to animate the lines, figured out how to animate that stuff. So then my next step would be go to a brand new composition, 1280, 720, all that stuff, and start laying out what this looks like. Put the circle, put the 0, 1, put the lines there. Now that I know how they're going to animate, I know how I'm going to create them. Draw in my title card stuff, draw in this, draw in that. Keep in mind that the title card, bless you, is a relatively short name compared to page transitions, which is our next assignment. That one's going to be a lot longer. Okay? So your steps today is to go through your title card that you're going to do, lay out how all the pieces are going to animate onto the screen, and then get into After Effects and start playing with how each one of those is going to animate, making sure you understand how they work. Next week, we're here on Wednesday. Yes, only Wednesday. And that's when this will be due. So we have basically today, Wednesday, and next Wednesday to finish it up. And that should be plenty of time. Okay? Make sure you're saving your stuff too, which I haven't saved anything. Why would I, right? There. Oops. Fall 19. Fancy. Sarcona. Fancy. All right. Questions on that yet? Sir?
How do you get to the track mat thing? I was a little bit confused about
The very bottom of your screen is this toggle switches and modes. When you click that, that will show that area.
Okay, cool, thank you.
So do we need thumbnails for this?
You will. You're going to take your same thumbnails you have. Okay, you can use one of those and then start to draw out. These are the items that are going to be here. Very similar to you see here. These are the items. This is how each piece is going to animate out. And then these are all the accent areas I'm going to do.
Okay, I see it.
Do we have to draw it on in Photoshop, or can we use Sketchbook?
You can still use your sketchbook.
Okay.
I think it helps to have them in different colors. So if you have different colors you can use, as long as it's obvious what's happening or you have lines indicating, yeah, it's good. Yes, sir.
On the left in After Effects, when you were making the new, like the new screens, are all those things on the left part of the same exact project? Or
Yes. Each one of these is a separate sequence inside my composition.
Okay.
So I can always pull from these later if I need to. So I don't need to like when I do my final one, I don't need to rebuild the burst because I have the burst there. I could just drop it into that spot and it's ready to go.
It's like things that you're able to save in like Flash that you're able to pull back.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, exactly like that.